Some contracts are designed to protect a future. Others are designed to bury a truth. Rain tapped softly against the windows of St. Mercy Medical Center as Nia Brooks finished the last hour of her 12-hour shift. The fluorescent lights above the pediatric wing cast a pale glow across the polished floors, and the distant hum of monitors blended with the low murmur of nurses exchanging reports. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night, and most of Chicago was settling into bed. Nia was just trying to make it through another day. She rubbed the back of her neck as she stepped into the staff lounge and glanced at her phone. 3 missed calls, all from the same number. The billing department of Lakeshore Oncology. Her chest tightened instantly. She already knew why they were calling. Her mother's treatment bill was overdue again. The amount sitting on that statement felt impossible. More than she could earn in years. More than any amount of overtime could ever cover. For a moment, she stared through the rain-streaked window overlooking the city lights below. She had spent months juggling extra shifts, skipping meals, delaying her own expenses, convincing herself that determination could somehow outperform mathematics. It couldn't. Numbers did not care about hope. A soft vibration pulled her back. A new email appeared on her screen. The sender was unfamiliar. The subject line was simple. Confidential opportunity. Nia almost deleted it. Almost. Instead, she opened it. The message contained only a few sentences. A private family was seeking a surrogate. Complete medical support would be provided. Compensation exceeded $2 million. Interested candidates were invited to attend a confidential interview. At the bottom sat a phone number and a time. Nia read it twice, then 3 times. Her first reaction was disbelief. Her second was anger. Her third was something far more dangerous. Hope. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the lake. She locked her phone and slipped it into her pocket. By the time she reached her apartment 40 minutes later, the rain had become heavier. Water shimmered across the sidewalks beneath the glow of streetlights. Her building stood between a laundromat and a corner grocery store that never seemed to close. It wasn't much, but it was home. Inside, the scent of herbal tea drifted from the kitchen. Her mother sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, smiling despite the exhaustion visible in her eyes. "Long shift?" she asked. Nia forced a smile. The usual. She didn't mention the bill. She didn't mention the email. She didn't mention the growing fear that time was moving faster than money. Instead, she helped her mother settle in for the night and waited until the apartment grew quiet before reopening the message. The interview was scheduled for the following afternoon. Downtown. Private office. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she clicked confirm. 24 hours later, Nia stepped into a skyscraper overlooking the Chicago River. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling glass. Everything felt impossibly expensive. The receptionist greeted her by name before she even introduced herself. That alone unsettled her. Moments later, she was escorted into a conference room larger than her entire apartment. A woman in a navy suit entered carrying a leather folder. Her smile was professional but careful. "Ms. Brooks," she said. "Thank you for coming." The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Medical history, family history, personal values, future goals. Every answer seemed to matter. Yet strangely, no one ever mentioned the identity of the intended parent. When Nia finally asked, the attorney simply replied, "Our client values privacy." By sunset, she found herself sitting alone at the long conference table. The city glowed beyond the glass walls. Thousands of lights stretched across the skyline like scattered stars. The attorney returned carrying a second folder. This one was thicker, much thicker. "If you are selected," she said carefully, "this will be the agreement." Nia opened it. Page after page of legal language. Medical obligations. Financial protections. Confidentiality requirements. Everything seemed standard. Then the attorney produced something unexpected. A cream-colored envelope sealed with a silver sticker. "What's this?" Nia asked. The woman paused. For the first time all afternoon, she appeared uncomfortable. "An additional provision." "Can I read it?" "Not yet." Nia frowned. "Why not?" "Because it becomes active only if the agreement is finalized." Silence settled between them. Beyond the windows, lightning flickered somewhere far across the dark horizon. Nia looked down at the envelope resting on the table. It felt strangely heavy despite weighing almost nothing. "What's inside?" she asked quietly. The attorney folded her hands. "A clause." "About what?" Another pause. "About what happens afterward." Nia stared at the envelope. Something deep inside her told her to walk away, to stand up, to leave, to forget she had ever received that email. But then she thought about hospital bills, about her mother's treatments, about the fear she saw hidden behind every reassuring smile. Slowly, she reached for the pen lying beside the contract. The city lights reflected against the glass around her. Rain streaked downward like silver lines across the skyline. Somewhere beyond those windows, a future was waiting. What Nia didn't know was that the most important decision of her life had nothing to do with carrying a child. It had everything to do with a single clause hidden inside an envelope she was not allowed to open. 3 days later, Nia received the call while restocking supplies at the nurse's station. The number matched the law firm. Her pulse quickened before she even answered. "Ms. Brooks," the attorney said. "Our client has reviewed the candidates. He would like to meet you personally." Nia glanced through the glass wall of the pediatric ward where a little boy was carefully coloring a picture with his mother beside him. For a moment, the world felt strangely quiet. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning." The meeting took place in a private penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The elevator climbed so high that her ears popped slightly. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that felt less like a home and more like a luxury hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the skyline. Gray clouds drifted above the water. Everything was immaculate. Everything felt controlled. A man stood near the windows with his hands folded behind it. His voice was calm, deep, precise. "Mr. Caldwell," she replied. Ethan Caldwell nodded once. Nothing more. No smile. No small talk. No attempt to make her comfortable. He gestured toward a seating area near the windows. "Please sit." Nia lowered herself into a chair while Ethan remained standing. The morning light reflected against the glass behind him, outlining his figure against the Chicago skyline. He looked exactly like the kind of man who appeared on magazine covers and financial news broadcasts. Powerful, successful, untouchable. Yet there was something else beneath the surface. Something colder. Something heavier. "I reviewed your file," he said. "Your medical history is excellent." Nia waited. "Your work record is excellent." She waited again. Ethan's eyes remained steady. "And every recommendation described you as dependable." Still no thank you. Still no explanation. Finally, Nia crossed one leg over the other. "I appreciate that." Silence settled between them. Ethan glanced toward the city beyond the glass. "Do you understand the responsibility involved?" "Yes. This process changes lives." "I know. It requires discipline." "I understand." He studied her carefully. Not like a man evaluating an employee. Not like a man searching for flaws. More like someone trying to solve a problem only he could see. "Good," he said. Then he delivered the sentence that lingered long after the meeting ended. "The baby comes first." Nia blinked. That was it. No discussion about dreams. No discussion about family. No discussion about gratitude. Just those 4 words. The baby comes first. Something about the statement unsettled her. Not because she disagreed. Of course the child would matter. But the way he said it felt different. Absolute. Final. As if everything else in the world existed somewhere beneath that single priority. "And what about the mother?" she asked quietly. Ethan's expression did not change. "The child is the priority." The answer hung in the air. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds and illuminated the lake with streaks of silver. Nia looked away first. A few minutes later, the attorney entered carrying additional paperwork. Medical schedules. Evaluation timelines. Travel arrangements. The meeting shifted back toward logistics. Professional. Structured. Predictable. Yet Nia could not stop thinking about Ethan's words. As the conversation continued, she noticed subtle details. A framed photograph sitting alone on a bookshelf. A woman smiling beside Ethan on a beach somewhere warm. The picture looked years old, dust-free, carefully preserved. Nearby sat another frame, turned face down. Oddly deliberate, oddly personal. Several times she caught Ethan glancing toward that section of the room when he thought nobody was watching. The attorney eventually closed the folder. "Do you have any remaining questions?" Nia looked from the documents to Ethan. "Just one." He met her gaze. "Why me?" The room became very still. Ethan seemed to consider the question longer than expected. Then he answered, "Because some people treat responsibility as a burden." His eyes remained fixed on hers. "You treat it as a promise." For the first time since arriving, Something almost human appeared behind his controlled exterior. Not warmth. Not quite. But something close enough to notice. Then it vanished. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As Nia stood to leave, the attorney handed her a temporary access card. If you move forward, accommodations have already been arranged. Nia accepted it. Her fingers brushed the edge of the card. Heavy stock. Embossed lettering. Prepared long before she had agreed to anything. On the elevator ride down, she stared at the Chicago skyline shrinking behind mirrored walls. Ethan Caldwell had said surprisingly little. Yet somehow the meeting left her with more questions than answers. And far above the city, inside that penthouse filled with silence and photographs, Ethan remained standing near the window long after she departed, watching the lake as though he were waiting for something that had never returned. 2 days later, a black town car arrived outside Nia's apartment building just after sunrise. The driver greeted her by name and opened the door without asking questions. Chicago moved past the tinted windows in a blur of steel, glass, and morning traffic. The closer they traveled toward the lakefront, the quieter Nia became. She had spent the previous night reviewing every detail she could remember from her meeting with Ethan Caldwell. His words still lingered in her thoughts. The baby comes first. Not once had he spoken about himself. Not once had he explained why becoming a father mattered so much. Yet somehow the absence of explanation felt heavier than any answer. The vehicle finally stopped in front of a private medical facility occupying the upper floors of a modern tower. Inside, everything gleamed beneath soft white lighting. Nurses moved efficiently through wide hallways. Receptionists greeted her before she even introduced herself. Someone had planned every step long before her arrival. By mid-morning, medical evaluations had been completed, blood work reviewed, and consultations finalized. Then came the final meeting. A conference room waited at the end of a quiet corridor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, where sunlight danced across the water in silver patterns. The attorney from the law firm sat at one end of the table. 2 additional legal specialists occupied the seats beside her. Stacked neatly before them rested a contract thick enough to resemble a college textbook. Nia settled into her chair and stared at the document. 214 pages, the attorney said gently. Every section exists to protect all parties involved. Nia released a slow breath. That seems like a lot of protection. A faint smile crossed the attorney's face. Mr. Caldwell believes in preparation. For nearly 3 hours they reviewed the agreement page by page. Medical responsibilities, financial provisions, insurance coverage, housing arrangements, travel accommodations, educational opportunities. Every detail appeared meticulously planned. The compensation alone could change her life forever. More importantly, it could secure her mother's treatment without uncertainty. Yet despite the impressive numbers and legal safeguards, something continued to bother her. Everything about Ethan Caldwell seemed designed around control. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was left undefined. It felt less like a contract and more like a blueprint for the future. Eventually, the attorney reached the final pages. The remaining signatures can be completed today if you choose to proceed. Nia glanced down at the mountain of paperwork. Her fingers rested lightly against the polished table. And the envelope? The room became noticeably quieter. One of the attorneys exchanged a glance with another. The lead attorney opened a drawer and removed the same cream-colored envelope she had seen before. The silver seal remained unbroken. Even from across the table, it seemed strangely important. This provision becomes active only after execution of the agreement, the attorney explained. It cannot be disclosed beforehand. Nia frowned. How can I agree to something I cannot read? You are agreeing to the primary contract. The provision remains contingent until activation. The explanation sounded legal, technically correct, yet deeply unsatisfying. Nia looked directly at the envelope. Something inside warned her not to ignore it. She remembered years of caring for sick children. Sometimes the smallest symptom revealed the largest problem. Sometimes the detail everyone overlooked became the one thing that mattered. Does Mr. Caldwell know what is inside? She asked. Yes. And I do not. Not yet. Outside the windows, clouds drifted slowly across the blue horizon. The lake stretched endlessly beyond the glass. For a moment, Nia imagined walking away. She could leave the building, return to the hospital, continue working double shifts. Continue pretending determination alone could solve impossible bills. But another image appeared beside it. Her mother sitting quietly on the couch, trying to hide her exhaustion behind a smile. The decision suddenly felt less complicated. It felt necessary. Nia reached for the pen. The attorneys remained silent as she signed the first page. Then another. Then another. Signature after signature carried her deeper into a future she could not fully see. Nearly 30 minutes later, the final page rested before her. Her hand paused briefly. Sunlight reflected across the table. The city shimmered below. Somewhere beyond the walls of the tower, life continued exactly as it had yesterday. Yet she knew nothing would remain the same after this moment. Slowly, she signed her name one last time. The attorney collected the documents and slid the sealed envelope back into the drawer. "Congratulations, Ms. Brooks." The words felt strangely ceremonial. Nia managed a small smile. As she stood to leave, her eyes drifted toward the drawer where the envelope had disappeared. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt curiosity growing stronger with every passing second. Because among more than 200 pages of carefully crafted legal language, the only thing she truly wanted to read was the one clause nobody would let her see. The move happened faster than Nia expected. Within a week, arrangements that would have taken most people months were completed. Her mother was transferred to a private treatment program funded entirely through the agreement. Medical appointments were scheduled. Housing paperwork was finalized. Every obstacle that had once felt impossible seemed to disappear overnight. Yet the ease of it all only made the sealed clause more difficult to ignore. On a gray Monday morning, a car delivered Nia to the Caldwell estate. The property sat on several acres north of the city, hidden behind iron gates and rows of mature oak trees. As the vehicle followed the winding driveway, the mansion slowly emerged through the branches. Stone walls, tall windows, slate roofing. It looked less like a house and more like a place built to survive generations. A member of the household staff welcomed her at the entrance. Inside, polished wood floors reflected warm afternoon light. The air carried the faint scent of cedar and fresh flowers. Everything appeared perfect. Too perfect. Nia followed the house manager through a series of long hallways. Family portraits lined the walls. Most featured Ethan standing beside executives, politicians, or business partners. But occasionally another face appeared. The same woman from the photograph she had noticed in the penthouse. Dark blonde hair, bright smile, calm eyes. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Nia asked. The house manager nodded politely. "Claire Caldwell." Something in the woman's tone suggested the subject should not be explored further. They reached a spacious guest suite overlooking a garden filled with white roses. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the property beyond. The room alone was larger than Nia's entire apartment. "Everything has been prepared for your comfort," the manager explained. "If you require anything, simply ask." Once she was alone, silence settled over the room. Nia placed her bags near the bed and crossed toward the window. The estate stretched across the landscape beneath an overcast sky. Beautiful, peaceful, yet strangely lonely. That evening, she joined Ethan for dinner in a formal dining room large enough to host 20 people. Only 2 seats were occupied. Candles flickered softly against crystal glassware. Rain tapped gently against distant windows. Ethan arrived precisely on time. As always, his expression revealed very little. They spoke about schedules, medical appointments, logistics, practical subjects. Nothing personal, nothing unnecessary. Halfway through dinner, Nia finally asked the question that had been lingering in her thoughts since arriving. "How long has it been?" Ethan looked up from his glass. "How long since what?" "Since your wife passed away." For a moment the room became very quiet. The candles continued flickering. Rain continued falling. Ethan's gaze shifted toward one of the windows. 5 years. Nia waited. He offered nothing more. "You still keep her photographs everywhere." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Something else. This was her home. The answer ended the conversation. Later that night, unable to sleep, Nia wandered through the mansion. The hallways were silent. Most of the staff had retired for the evening. Soft lamps illuminated corners of the estate in pools of golden light. Eventually, she reached a library. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Leather-bound books lined the walls. A fire glowed quietly inside a stone fireplace. On a nearby table sat several framed photographs. Claire appeared in almost all of them, laughing on a sailboat, standing beside Ethan at a charity event, smiling beneath autumn leaves. Nia studied the images carefully. Then she noticed something unusual. One photograph had been removed. A rectangular patch of dust-free wood remained where a frame had once rested. Someone had intentionally taken it away. Her eyes narrowed. Before she could examine the area more closely, a sound echoed softly behind her. Footsteps. She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway. Neither spoke for several seconds. Firelight danced across the room. Could not sleep, he asked. Nia folded her arms lightly. I was exploring. His gaze drifted toward the empty space on the table. Just for an instant, something changed in his expression. A shadow of discomfort. Then it vanished. You should get some rest, he said quietly. Your first appointment is early. Nia nodded. Yet as she followed him toward the hallway, her attention remained fixed on the empty spot where the missing photograph should have been. Because for the first time since signing the agreement, she felt certain of something. The clause hidden inside that sealed envelope was not the only secret living inside the Caldwell estate. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. Every detail of Nia's life had been reorganized with remarkable efficiency. Medical appointments appeared on her calendar before she remembered to schedule them. Healthy meals arrived exactly when needed. Transportation waited outside whenever she had somewhere to go. The entire system operated with quiet precision, as though an invisible clock governed every movement inside the Caldwell estate. Yet despite the luxury surrounding her, Nia often found herself noticing the smallest things instead. The way sunlight filtered through the tall windows each morning. The distant sound of wind moving through the oak trees beyond the gardens. The silence that seemed to follow Ethan wherever he went. One Tuesday afternoon, nearly 6 weeks after signing the agreement, Nia sat in a private examination room overlooking the lake. The ultrasound monitor glowed softly in the dimmed space, while the specialist completed routine measurements. Everything appeared normal, healthy, steady. Nia released a breath she had not realized she was holding. The physician smiled. Everything looks excellent. Relief spread through her chest. For the first time since beginning the process, the reality of what lay ahead felt tangible. Real. A new life was beginning to take shape. When the appointment ended, she stepped into the hallway expecting to find a driver waiting. Instead, Ethan stood near the elevators. His hands rested inside the pockets of a dark overcoat. He looked as composed as ever. Yet something about his presence caught her off guard. You came? She asked. Ethan glanced toward the consultation room she had just left. I was already nearby. Nia suspected that was not entirely true. The facility was nearly 40 miles from his downtown offices. But she let the explanation pass. They rode the elevator down together. Neither spoke much. Outside, a cold breeze swept across the parking area. Ethan opened the passenger door of a waiting vehicle before she could reach it herself. The gesture surprised her more than it should have. He noticed her expression. What? Nia slid into the seat. Nothing. Ethan closed the door and walked around to the other side. The drive back remained mostly quiet. Yet over the following days, similar moments began appearing unexpectedly. Ethan somehow remembered which tea she preferred during breakfast. He knew she disliked overly sweet desserts. During a visit to the estate's greenhouse, she casually mentioned missing a particular brand of herbal tea she used to buy from a small shop near her apartment. 2 days later, several boxes appeared in the kitchen pantry. Nobody explained how. Nobody needed to. The pattern continued. Small details, small observations, small acts of consideration that did not fit the image of the distant billionaire she had first encountered. One rainy evening, Nia sat alone in the library reading when Ethan entered carrying several folders from work. The fire crackled softly inside the fireplace. Rain traced silver lines across the windows. Ethan paused when he noticed the book in her hands. You like historical biographies? Nia looked up. I do. He nodded toward the cover. Claire loved that author. The words slipped out before he seemed prepared to say them. Silence followed. Ethan stared briefly into the fire. For the first time, he had mentioned his wife without being asked. Nia closed the book gently. She must have enjoyed this room. Ethan's gaze traveled slowly across the shelves. She practically lived here. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. She believed every book carried a piece of someone else's life. Nia waited, sensing there was more. But the moment passed. Ethan straightened. The familiar walls returned behind his expression. "Good night, Nia." He left before she could respond. Later that evening, she found herself thinking less about Claire and more about Ethan. About the contradiction he seemed determined to maintain. Publicly, he was known as one of the most disciplined executives in the country. Privately, he moved through his own home like a man carrying something invisible, something heavy. The following week brought another appointment. Another positive report. Another unexpected appearance from Ethan. This time he arrived carrying a folder filled with medical notes. During the consultation, he asked detailed questions about nutritional requirements, future milestones, and recommended precautions. The physician eventually laughed softly. "Mr. Caldwell, you may be the most prepared father I have ever met." Ethan offered a polite nod. Nothing more. Yet on the drive home, Nia noticed him staring out the window longer than usual. "You really have read all of those reports, have you not?" she asked. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Everyone." Nia looked away before he could see her reaction. Because something had shifted. The cold distance that once defined every interaction was beginning to crack. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough for light to reach the other side. And for the first time, Nia started wondering whether the greatest mystery inside the Caldwell estate was not the hidden clause or the missing photograph. It might be Ethan Caldwell himself. By early autumn, the Caldwell estate seemed to exist in a season separate from the rest of the world. Golden leaves drifted across the gardens while cool winds moved through the trees beyond the property line. The days passed quietly, marked by medical appointments, long walks, and the steady rhythm of a future approaching 1 week at a time. Nia had begun to settle into the strange balance of life inside the estate. Yet the feeling that something remained hidden never fully disappeared. It followed her through hallways, lingered behind closed doors, and surfaced whenever she caught Ethan staring at old photographs with an expression he never showed anyone else. One afternoon, while Ethan attended meetings downtown, Nia decided to explore a section of the house she had not visited before. The east wing was rarely used. Most of the rooms remained closed, preserved almost exactly as they had been years earlier. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long bands of gold across polished floors. The silence felt different here, older somehow. As she rounded a corner, she noticed a partially open door. Inside sat what appeared to be a private study. Shelves lined the walls. Framed certificates hung beside landscape paintings. On a desk near the window rested several storage boxes. Nia had no intention of searching through personal belongings. She only stepped closer because something caught her attention. A photograph. The same missing photograph she had noticed weeks earlier in the library. It stood face down beside one of the boxes. Curious, she carefully turned it over. The image showed Claire standing beside another woman. Both were smiling. Both appeared happy. Nothing unusual about that. Yet Nia immediately recognized the second woman. She had seen her before. Not in person. In photographs displayed throughout the estate. The woman was Olivia Mercer, Claire's younger sister. Nia remembered hearing the name during a conversation among staff members. What unsettled her was not the photograph itself. It was the expression on Claire's face. There was tension behind the smile, a strain that seemed oddly out of place. Before Nia could study the image further, a voice sounded from the doorway. "You found it." She turned quickly. An older woman stood there holding a tray of fresh flowers. It was Margaret, the longtime housekeeper. She had worked for the Caldwell family for more than 20 years. Nia lowered the frame. "I did not mean to pry." Margaret offered a gentle smile. Most people would have. Her eyes drifted toward the photograph. "Mr. Caldwell keeps that one hidden." Nia hesitated. "Why?" The housekeeper looked toward the window. For several seconds, she appeared to consider her answer carefully. "Because not every family story ends the way people believe." The response raised more questions than it answered. "What happened?" Margaret's smile faded. "That is not my story to tell." She placed the flowers on a nearby table and quietly left the room. The words lingered long after she disappeared. Not every family story ends the way people believe. That evening, Ethan returned later than usual. Rain tapped softly against the windows while clouds rolled across the dark sky. Nia found him in the library reviewing documents beside the fireplace. The glow from the flames reflected across the glass of his reading glasses. For a moment, he looked less like a billionaire executive and more like an exhausted man carrying responsibilities nobody else could see. Nia sat across from him. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan removed his glasses. "You usually do." "Who is Olivia Mercer?" The reaction was immediate. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a subtle shift in his expression. His shoulders stiffened slightly. His eyes lowered for the briefest moment. Then the mask returned. "Claire's sister. Are you close?" Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled softly. Rain continued falling beyond the windows. Finally, Ethan answered. "Not anymore." Nia studied him carefully. "Why?" He closed the folder in front of him. "Because some losses do not stop when the funeral ends." The words landed heavily. Before Nia could ask another question, Ethan stood. "You should get some rest." She watched him leave the room, watched the shadows swallow him as he disappeared into the hallway. And for the first time since arriving at the estate, Nia realized the mystery surrounding Claire's death might be larger than a hidden clause or a missing photograph. Somewhere inside the fractured relationship between Ethan and Olivia Mercer lay a truth nobody seemed willing to discuss. A truth that still haunted this house 5 years later. The discovery came on a quiet Sunday afternoon when the estate seemed almost asleep. A light rain drifted across the gardens, blurring the distant tree line beyond the windows. Nia had spent most of the morning reading in the library while Ethan attended a charity board meeting downtown. The house felt unusually empty. Even the staff moved more quietly than normal. Looking for a different book, she wandered into a smaller reading room connected to the main library. Few people used it. The shelves were older. The furniture showed signs of years of use. Dust floated through shafts of gray light, filtering past the windows. As Nia reached for a hardcover biography, something slipped from between the pages and landed softly on the floor. She bent to retrieve it. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed slightly with age. At first she assumed it was an old bookmark. Then she noticed the handwriting. The name Claire appeared at the top. Nia froze. She knew she should put it back immediately. The letter clearly belonged to someone else. Yet before she could fold it shut, a single line caught her attention. It was written in neat blue ink. "If anything happens to me, Ethan must never blame himself." Her pulse quickened. She read the sentence again. Then a third time. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. Carefully, she unfolded the page. The note was not a legal document. It was personal, intimate, written years ago by Claire herself. Most of the content spoke about family, hopes, and future plans. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, until the final section. There, Claire mentioned her sister Olivia. The words were brief but unmistakable. She wrote about a disagreement that had grown worse over time. A separation neither woman seemed able to repair. The details were vague. Yet one sentence stood out. "Olivia knows the truth, even if Ethan never does." Nia stared at the line. The truth. What truth? Before she could think further, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Instinctively, she folded the letter and slipped it back into the book. A moment later, Margaret entered carrying fresh flowers. Her eyes moved from the shelf to Nia's face. The older woman seemed to sense something immediately. "You look troubled," she said gently. Nia hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" Margaret set the flowers down. "You may ask. Did Claire and Olivia have a falling out?" The question lingered in the air. Margaret's expression softened with sadness. "They loved each other very much." "That is not what I asked." The housekeeper remained silent for several seconds. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, she sighed. "Sometimes people can love each other deeply and still become strangers." Nia stepped closer. "Was it before Claire died?" Margaret nodded once. "Yes." "Did Ethan know?" The older woman looked toward the doorway. "Mr. Caldwell knew enough to be hurt by it." The answer only deepened the mystery. Later that evening, Ethan returned to the estate. The rain had ended, leaving the gardens shimmering beneath moonlight. During dinner, he appeared distracted. Several times he glanced at incoming messages on his phone. A major acquisition was apparently consuming his attention. Yet Nia could not stop thinking about the letter. Finally, she set down her fork. Did Claire write often? Ethan looked up. She kept journals. And letters? A shadow crossed his face. Sometimes. Nia watched him carefully. Did she ever leave one for you? Silence settled over the table. The candles flickered softly between them. Ethan lowered his gaze toward his glass. For the first time in months, he looked genuinely unprepared for a question. "No," he said quietly. "At least none that I ever received." Something about the answer felt important. Honest. Painfully honest. Nia remembered the line she had read earlier. Ethan must never blame himself. It sounded exactly like something a wife would want her husband to know. Yet somehow he had never seen it. As the meal continued, she found herself studying him differently. Not as the powerful executive known across the country. Not as the man who controlled every detail of the agreement. But as someone standing at the center of a story, missing crucial pages. And somewhere between Claire's hidden letter, Olivia's silence, and Ethan's unanswered questions, Nia became certain of one thing. The truth everyone kept avoiding had not disappeared 5 years ago. It was still here, waiting inside the walls of the Caldwell estate. Nearly a week passed before the next piece of the puzzle revealed itself. The days moved quietly through the estate as autumn deepened across northern Illinois. Orange leaves gathered beneath the trees. Cold winds swept across the gardens. Inside the mansion, preparations continued for the months ahead. Medical appointments remained positive. The physicians were pleased. Ethan seemed calmer after each report, though he would never admit it aloud. Yet despite the routine settling around her, Nia could not stop thinking about Claire's letter. The sentence repeated itself in her mind whenever she found herself alone. Olivia knows the truth, even if Ethan never does. It felt less like a statement and more like a warning left behind by someone who had run out of time. One Thursday afternoon, Nia visited her mother at the private treatment center funded through the agreement. The facility overlooked Lake Michigan and resembled a luxury hotel more than a medical center. Her mother's health had improved noticeably over the past several months. Color had returned to her face. Her smile came more easily now. Watching that transformation reminded Nia why she had signed the contract in the first place. As they sat together near a large window overlooking the water, her mother studied her carefully. "You have been carrying something heavier than a baby," she said softly. Nia laughed. "That is quite an observation. I am your mother." She reached across the table and squeezed Nia's hand. "What is troubling you?" For a moment Nia considered telling her everything. The hidden clause, the letters, the unanswered questions surrounding Claire. Instead, she simply looked toward the lake. "Have you ever felt like everyone around you knows a secret except you?" Her mother smiled faintly. "More times than I can count." "What do you do?" "You wait." Nia frowned. "That sounds frustrating." The truth has a habit of arriving eventually. Usually when people stop trying so hard to hide it. The advice lingered with her during the drive back to the estate. By the time she arrived, evening shadows stretched across the grounds. The house felt unusually quiet. Margaret informed her that Ethan was working late in his private office. After dinner, unable to sleep, Nia wandered into the library once again. The room had become her refuge. The fire glowed softly. Rain tapped against the windows. She settled into a chair and selected a book from the shelf. As she opened it, something unexpected slipped from between the pages. Another folded piece of paper. Her heart immediately quickened. This time it was not a letter. It was a journal page. The handwriting belonged to Claire. Nia recognized it instantly. The entry appeared to have been torn from a larger notebook years earlier. Most of the writing described ordinary events. A charity gala, a weekend trip, plans for the future. Then, halfway down the page, a single paragraph caught her attention. "Ethan thinks he is protecting me, but he does not understand what Olivia discovered. If she ever tells him, everything will change." Nia stared at the words. Her pulse echoed in her ears. Olivia discovered something. Something significant enough to change everything. Before she could read further, a voice sounded from the doorway. "You found another one." Nia looked up sharply. Ethan stood there. His expression was unreadable. For several seconds, neither moved. The journal page remained in her hands. Ethan's eyes settled on it immediately. A strange sadness crossed his face. Not anger. Not frustration. Sadness. Slowly, Nia rose from her chair. "I did not mean to go looking for this." Ethan stepped closer. The firelight reflected across his features. "I know." His voice was quiet. "Tired." "Did you read it?" Nia hesitated before nodding. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The gesture lasted less than a second, yet it revealed more emotion than she had seen from him in months. "Then you know more than I do." The answer surprised her. "You never read this." Ethan shook his head. "No." Nia looked down at the page. Claire mentioned Olivia discovering something. Silence filled the room. Ethan stared into the fire. "Whatever it was, Olivia never told me." His voice carried a weight that seemed years old. After Claire died, she cut me out of her life completely. Nia studied him carefully. Have you ever tried to find out why? Ethan laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Every day for 5 years. The room fell silent once more. Rain continued tracing paths down the windows. Firelight danced across the shelves. And as Nia looked at the journal page in her hands, she realized the mystery had finally shifted. It was no longer about what had happened to Claire. It was about what Olivia Mercer knew, why she had hidden it, and why everyone connected to Claire seemed terrified of letting Ethan discover the truth. The answer arrived on a night when nobody expected it. A storm rolled across the lake, pressing dark clouds against the windows of the Caldwell estate. Wind moved through the trees with a low, mournful sound that seemed to belong to another century. Nia had reached the final months of her pregnancy, and sleep came less easily than before. Shortly after midnight, she found herself awake, sitting near the window of her suite with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The estate was silent. Even the staff had long since retired for the evening. Unable to settle her thoughts, she opened the secure tablet that had been provided for medical records and appointment schedules. Dozens of documents filled the system. Test results, physician notes, insurance forms. Everything appeared perfectly organized. Yet as she scrolled through the folders, something unusual caught her attention. A section labeled Supplemental Agreement had recently been unlocked. Her pulse quickened immediately. She stared at the screen. For months, the hidden provision had hovered over every decision she made. For months, it had existed like a locked door at the end of a hallway. Slowly, she opened the file. The document appeared in black text against a white background. The title read Clause 47. For several seconds, she could not move. Then she began reading. The first paragraphs contained legal language, confidentiality requirements, privacy obligations, administrative procedures. Nothing alarming, nothing unexpected. But as her eyes moved lower, the meaning became impossible to ignore. Following the birth of the child, the gestational carrier shall permanently relinquish all future contact with the child. The gestational carrier shall not request visitation, communication, correspondence, photographs, updates, or identifying information. The gestational carrier shall permanently withdraw from all aspects of the child's life and future development. Nia felt the air leave her lungs. She read the words again, then again. The language remained unchanged. Cold, precise, final. Further down the page, another section appeared. The gestational carrier shall relocate to a residence selected by independent counsel for a minimum transition period of 12 months following delivery. During that time, all direct communication with the Caldwell family shall cease. Her hands tightened around the tablet. Suddenly, every conversation, every unanswered question, every strange silence inside the estate seemed connected. The clause was not simply about privacy. It was about disappearance. Complete disappearance. Rain struck the windows harder. Thunder echoed somewhere over the lake. Nia continued reading. The final page contained a handwritten note attached to the legal document. Unlike the contract language, this portion had clearly been added later. It carried no attorney signatures, no official formatting, only a single sentence typed beneath a date from 5 years earlier. No child should ever lose a mother twice. Nia froze. The words felt entirely different from the rest of the agreement. Human, emotional, personal. She stared at the sentence until her vision blurred. 5 years earlier. The same year Claire had died. The same year Olivia vanished from Ethan's life. The same year every mystery inside the estate seemed to begin. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. She quickly locked the screen. Before she could answer, the door opened slightly. Ethan stood in the hallway. Concern appeared immediately on his face. You are awake. Nia looked at him. Truly looked at him. For the first time since arriving at the estate, she felt anger rising beneath the surface. Not loud anger. Not explosive anger. Something deeper. Disappointment. How long were you planning to wait before telling me? Ethan's expression changed instantly. His eyes moved toward the tablet resting beside her. The silence between them became heavy. You read it. It was not a question. Nia stood slowly. You were going to make me disappear. Rain rattled against the glass behind her. Ethan remained motionless in the doorway. That is not what happened. Then explain it. Her voice remained calm, but every word carried weight. Ethan stepped into the room. The storm flashed briefly beyond the windows. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he looked toward the claws still glowing faintly on the locked screen. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded older than before, more tired. The clause was never meant to protect the child. Nia stared at him. Then what was it for? Ethan lowered his eyes. The answer seemed to cost him something. It was meant to protect me. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain. And in that moment, Nia realized the hidden clause had never been about contracts, confidentiality, or legal protection. It was tied to a secret Ethan Caldwell had carried for 5 years. A secret powerful enough to shape every decision he made. A secret he could no longer hide. The storm continued through the night, washing the estate in silver rain and restless shadows. Nia stood beside the window long after Ethan's confession, her reflection faint against the dark glass. Protect me. The words echoed through her mind again and again. They felt wrong, selfish, incomplete. Months earlier, she might have accepted a vague answer and waited for more information. Not anymore. Too much had happened. Too many secrets had already shaped her life. She turned slowly toward him. Protect you from what? Ethan remained near the doorway. For a moment, he looked less like the man whose name appeared on skyscrapers and magazine covers, and more like someone trapped inside a memory he could not escape. The silence stretched between them. Rain rattled softly against the windows. Finally, he walked farther into the room and sat in a chair across from her. 5 years ago, he said quietly, Claire wanted children more than anything. Nia listened without interrupting. We spent years trying. Specialists, treatments, consultations, every option available. His gaze lowered toward the floor. Nothing worked. The sadness in his voice felt genuine. Old, deeply worn. Claire blamed herself. Nia folded her arms around herself. But it was not her fault. Ethan nodded once. I told her that every day. The room fell silent again. Outside, lightning flashed briefly over the lake. Then what happened? Ethan exhaled slowly. One afternoon, she came home after meeting with Olivia. Something had changed. His eyes drifted toward the rain beyond the window. She seemed lighter, happier. Because of Olivia? That is what I believed. He paused. A few weeks later, she began making plans. Talking about the future. Talking about family. Nia remembered the journals. The photographs. The hope hidden inside Claire's letters. And then, Ethan's jaw tightened. Then she was gone. The grief behind the statement filled the room. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just heavy. Like a weight carried for years. Nia lowered her eyes. I am sorry. Ethan nodded politely, though the apology clearly did little to soften old wounds. Afterward, I searched for answers. He leaned forward slightly. I found letters, notes, journal entries, fragments. Nia immediately thought of the pages she had discovered, but never the full story. Exactly. His voice sharpened. Every clue pointed toward Olivia knowing something important. And she never told you. Ethan shook his head. She disappeared from my life entirely. The realization settled heavily between them. 5 years of questions. 5 years of silence. 5 years of uncertainty. Nia looked toward the tablet resting on the bedside table. So the clause was created because of Claire? Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Partly. Partly. He stood and crossed toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass behind him. After Claire died, I convinced myself that attachment was dangerous. The admission sounded almost painful. I told myself that distance was safer. Nia stared at him. For who? Ethan laughed softly without humor. Everyone. The answer revealed more than he intended. Suddenly the clause made sense. Not because it was reasonable. Because it was fear disguised as control. Fear written into legal language. Fear protected by signatures and contracts. Nia rose slowly from her chair. You planned to send me away because you were afraid. Ethan did not deny it. The honesty surprised her more than any argument could have. I thought it would prevent complications. Complications? Her voice remained calm. You mean feelings? Ethan turned toward her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then he nodded once. The truth landed quietly between them. Months ago, he had viewed everything through contracts and procedures. Now those walls were cracking. Nia looked away first. She needed air, space, distance from the conversation and everything it represented. I need some time. Ethan's expression tightened. Nia, no. She raised a hand gently. I need to think. He nodded immediately. No argument. No demand. Just acceptance. She walked past him and left the room. The hallway felt cooler than before. The estate seemed quieter. Yet as she moved through the dim corridors, another realization slowly emerged. The clause was no longer the biggest mystery. The larger question remained unanswered. What had Olivia discovered? What truth had Claire protected? And why had that truth been powerful enough to shape 5 years of grief, guilt, and silence? Somewhere inside those missing answers was the reason everything had happened. And for the first time, Nia suspected she was closer to finding it than anyone realized. 3 days passed without another conversation about the clause. The storm had moved on, leaving crisp autumn skies and cold mornings behind. Yet the silence between Nia and Ethan felt different now. It was no longer built from distance. It was built from truths that had finally begun to surface. Neither of them knew what to do with them. Late Friday afternoon, Nia returned from a routine appointment carrying a folder of medical reports. Everything remained healthy. Everything remained on schedule. The physicians were pleased with the progress. Normally, Ethan would have asked for every detail before she even sat down. This time, he simply looked up from his desk and asked one question. "Are you feeling well?" Nia nodded. Yes. He seemed relieved. The simplicity of the exchange lingered in her thoughts long afterward. That evening, as sunset painted the estate in shades of gold and amber, Margaret approached her in the library carrying a small wooden box. The older woman's expression was unusually serious. "This arrived today," she said quietly. "For Mr. Caldwell." Nia glanced at the box. There was no return address. Only a handwritten name across the lid. Ethan Caldwell. "Why are you showing me?" Margaret hesitated. "Because the courier specifically asked whether you were still here." A chill moved through Nia despite the warmth of the room. Who sent it? He would not say. Moments later, Ethan entered the library. The moment he saw the box, all color drained from his face. Nia had never witnessed such an immediate reaction from him. His hand froze halfway toward the table. Where did this come from? Margaret shook her head. The messenger left immediately. Ethan stared at the handwriting as though he had seen a ghost. Slowly, he lowered himself into a chair. The room fell silent. Even the crackling fire seemed quieter. Finally, he opened the lid. Inside rested a single journal. Dark blue leather. Worn edges. A silver clasp. Nia recognized it instantly from photographs she had seen throughout the estate. Claire's journal. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he lifted it. The movement was so subtle most people would have missed it. Nia did not. Carefully, he opened the first page. A folded envelope slipped free and landed on the table. Across the front, written in Claire's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 simple words. "For Ethan, when the time is right." No one spoke. Ethan stared at the envelope for several seconds before finally opening it. The letter inside contained only a few pages. Yet as he began reading, something changed in his expression. Shock, confusion, disbelief, then sorrow, deep sorrow. Nia watched silently. When he finished, he lowered the pages onto the table and closed his eyes. The room remained still. "Ethan." He looked up slowly. His voice sounded distant. Claire knew. Nia frowned. Knew what? Ethan swallowed hard. 5 years ago, before she died, Olivia discovered something in our medical records. He stared at the letter in front of him. The fertility issue was never Claire. Nia felt her breath catch. Ethan looked away toward the fading light beyond the windows. "It was me." The words settled heavily into the room. Suddenly, years of guilt, years of treatment, years of unanswered questions began rearranging themselves into a different story. Claire found out. Nia asked softly. Ethan nodded. She learned the truth shortly before everything happened. His eyes returned to the letter. "And she never told me." Silence stretched between them. Nia tried to understand. Claire had protected him, protected his pride, protected his heart, even while carrying a burden that was never hers to carry. Ethan laughed quietly, though the sound broke halfway through. "All those years I believed she blamed herself." He shook his head. "She was protecting me." Nia lowered herself into a nearby chair. The revelation changed everything. Not just for Ethan, for the entire mystery. For Olivia, for Claire's letters, for every unanswered question lingering inside the estate. Ethan lifted the final page again. "There is more." His voice softened. Claire wrote that Olivia kept one final secret. Something she promised never to reveal until the right moment. Nia felt her pulse quicken. Did she say what it was? Ethan looked directly at her. Slowly, he shook his head. No. Outside the windows, the last light of day slipped below the horizon. Shadows filled the estate. And somewhere beyond the answers they had finally uncovered waited one final truth. The truth Olivia Mercer had hidden for 5 years. The truth Claire believed would change everything. The final weeks arrived with a quiet urgency that touched every corner of the Caldwell estate. Winter lingered just beyond the horizon, and the air carried the sharp scent of approaching cold. Nia could feel the change not only in the weather but in the people around her. The household staff moved with greater attentiveness. Physicians checked in more frequently. Ethan seemed incapable of going more than a few hours without asking whether she needed anything. Yet beneath the practical concerns, another tension remained. Claire's final secret still hovered over everything. 3 days after the journal arrived, another message came. This time it was an email forwarded through Ethan's attorneys. The sender's name appeared at the bottom. Olivia Mercer. The room fell silent when Ethan opened it. Nia sat across from him in the library while late afternoon sunlight faded across the windows. His eyes moved slowly across the screen. Then he stopped. What is it? Nia asked. Ethan turned the laptop toward her. The message contained only a few sentences. I think it is finally time. Meet me tomorrow. St. Andrew Medical Center. Conference Room B. Bring Claire's journal. Do not come alone. Olivia. Nia read the message twice. Her pulse quickened. After 5 years of silence, Olivia had finally reached out. The next afternoon, gray clouds covered the city as they arrived at the hospital. Ethan carried the journal beneath his arm. Nia walked beside him through the quiet corridors. The building felt strangely familiar. Years earlier, Claire had received treatment here. Many of the records connected to the mystery originated inside these walls. Conference Room B sat at the end of a private hallway. When they entered, a woman stood near the window overlooking the lake. Olivia Mercer. She looked remarkably similar to Claire. The same eyes, the same smile. Yet sorrow seemed permanently etched into her expression. For several seconds nobody spoke. 5 years of distance filled the room. Ethan finally broke the silence. Why now? Olivia lowered her gaze. Because Claire asked me to wait. Ethan stared at her. For 5 years. Until the right moment. Her voice trembled slightly. Until you were ready to hear the truth. Nia watched carefully as Olivia reached into her bag and removed a sealed envelope. The paper appeared old, preserved, protected. Across the front, written in Claire's handwriting, were the words to be opened when hope returns. Ethan's breath caught. Slowly, Olivia handed him the envelope. She gave this to me 2 weeks before she died. The room remained completely silent as Ethan opened it. Inside rested several pages. Claire's final letter. He began reading. The first page described love, gratitude, memories. Then came the truth. Claire explained that she had discovered Ethan's medical diagnosis years earlier. She knew the fertility struggles were never her fault. She knew he carried the burden alone because he believed protecting her meant hiding his own pain. Tears filled Olivia's eyes as Ethan continued reading. Then he reached the final section. His expression changed instantly. Shock, disbelief, emotion too large to hide. Nia leaned forward slightly. What is it? Ethan looked up slowly. His eyes glistened. Claire knew she was dying long before anyone else realized. The words landed heavily. Olivia nodded. She found out months before she told us. Ethan lowered his gaze back to the letter. Claire had written that she wanted her final months filled with hope instead of fear. She wanted Ethan to keep dreaming about a future family. She wanted him to continue believing life could still move forward. Most importantly, she wanted him to understand one thing. The letter ended with a single request. Do not spend your life protecting yourself from loss. Love anyway. The room fell silent. Nia felt tears gathering in her own eyes. Suddenly everything made sense. The hidden clause, the emotional distance, the obsession with control. Ethan had spent 5 years building walls because he believed loss could be prevented if nobody came too close. Claire had understood that long before he did. Olivia stepped forward. There is one more thing. Ethan looked up. Olivia smiled softly through her tears. Claire told me that one day someone would walk into your life and remind you that fear is not the same thing as love. Her gaze shifted gently toward Nia, and for the first time since entering the room, Ethan followed her eyes. Snow arrived the week the child was born. Soft white flakes drifted across Chicago beneath a pale winter sky, covering streets, rooftops, and bare tree branches in silence. The city seemed to slow beneath the snowfall, as though the world itself had paused to make room for something new. Inside St. Andrew Medical Center, warm lights glowed against polished floors while nurses moved quietly through the maternity wing. Nia sat near the window of her private room, watching snow gather on the ledges outside. The long journey that had begun with a contract, a sealed clause, and a house full of unanswered questions had finally reached its last chapter. Yet strangely, she felt calmer than she had in months. The fear was gone. The uncertainty was gone. Only clarity remained. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Ethan entered carrying a folder beneath one arm. He looked tired. Not from work. Not from stress. From change. Real change. The kind that happened inside a person before it appeared anywhere else. He crossed the room slowly and placed the folder on a nearby table. "What is that?" Nia asked. Ethan looked at the folder for a moment. Then he opened it. The first page revealed a familiar title. Clause 47. Nia felt her chest tighten. The document that had shaped so much of their story rested between them once again. Ethan removed the pages and stared at them quietly. Snow continued falling outside the window. The room remained still. Finally he spoke. "I spent 5 years believing that distance could protect people." His voice was calm, honest. "I thought if I controlled enough details, I could avoid losing anyone again." Nia listened silently. Ethan lowered his eyes. "Claire spent her final months trying to teach me the opposite." He looked up. "And so did you." Slowly, he lifted the pages. Then, without ceremony, without lawyers, without witnesses, he tore the document in half. The sound was soft but unmistakable. He tore it again, then once more. The pieces fell into a wastebasket beside the table. Neither of them looked away. The moment felt larger than paper, larger than contracts, larger than legal language. It felt like the end of fear. Ethan released a long breath. No conditions. Nia stared at him. No obligations. He nodded. No disappearing. The room fell silent. Tears gathered in Nia's eyes before she could stop them. Not because of the contract. Because for the first time since they had met, Ethan was no longer hiding behind it. A few hours later, family and friends gathered quietly in the room. Margaret arrived carrying flowers. Olivia stood near the window, smiling through tears as snow drifted beyond the glass. Even Nia's mother sat nearby, healthier and stronger than she had been in years. The atmosphere felt nothing like the beginning of the story. There were no secrets left, no locked envelopes, no hidden journals, only people learning how to move forward. As evening settled across the city, Ethan stood beside the window holding Claire's final letter. He had read it countless times since receiving it. Yet one sentence continued to matter more than all the others. "Do not spend your life protecting yourself from loss. Love anyway." He folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into his pocket. Then he crossed the room toward Nia. For several moments, neither spoke. They simply watched snow fall beyond the glass. Finally, Ethan smiled. A real smile. Unpracticed. Unprotected. "I used to think family was something you planned." Nia looked at him. "And now?" Ethan glanced around the room. At Olivia. At Margaret. At Nia's mother. At the new life that had brought them all together. "Now I think family is something you choose." The words settled warmly between them. Outside, the city lights began to glow beneath the snowfall. Inside, laughter replaced silence. Hope replaced grief. And somewhere within the quiet peace of that winter evening, the people Claire loved most finally understood the gift she had left behind. Not a secret, not a mystery, not even a letter. She had left them permission to move forward. Months later, when spring arrived and green returned to the trees surrounding the Caldwell estate, a new photograph appeared in the library. It sat where the missing frame had once stood. Visitors often noticed it immediately. Ethan, Nia, Olivia, Margaret, Nia's mother, smiling together beneath bright sunlight. No one looking away. No empty spaces. No hidden truths. Just a family shaped by loss, healed by honesty, and rebuilt through choice. And every time Ethan passed that photograph, he remembered the lesson that had changed everything. Love was never something protected by distance. Love was what remained when fear finally let go.